I know when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, I call them the skid marks of the National Football League, and they've earned it and they've deserved it. Every bit of it. And I know I have a reputation for loving to rag on them, but let's be honest, it can be fun to rag on them. But contrary to popular opinion and belief, I do not solely just rag on them to rag on them, nor do I always rag on them. If they do something good, I will talk about them doing something good. Do I not? I feel I'm a fair guy. Maybe you guys don't always see it that way, but I am fair. I'm honest. You might not always like it, but I'm fair. And I will say whatever I feel, regardless of what you may or may not think about it. That is just my style. It's the only way to roll. And when it came down to the Cleveland Browns trading a 4th and 7th round pick to get Jarvis Landry, I thought it was a really good deal for the team. Here is a guy that's played every game over the past 4 seasons, and I know it's easy to talk about 2017, and I have my fun with it a little bit too. You talk about he had 112 receptions, he was targeted like 160-something times, but he only had 987 yards receiving, so he couldn't even break 1,000 yards over 112 receptions. And yeah, that is something that stands out. But I do think myself and everybody else is leaving out a very important factor, and that is the Jay Cutler factor. That is the Dolphins trading away Ajayi during the season and all this other stuff that goes on. You know, were you going to expect much more out of Jarvis Landry playing with Jay Cutler? No, you weren't. But this is a guy that's had a couple of 1,000-yard seasons in his career. I know he's not a number 1. He's primarily been thought of a slot receiver. Now, is that more of a reflection of the Dolphins and maybe them not knowing what they're doing, or is that Jarvis Landry's reality? Well, here's what I know. Is the Browns didn't have to give up a ton in terms of draft picks to get a guy that they could count on to be there, especially looking at the situation is Corey Coleman can't stay healthy, and you can't trust Josh Gordon because we all know you can't trust Josh Gordon. And he hasn't done nearly enough for nearly long enough to be able to trust him. So you feel like Jarvis Landry is a good, safe fallback guy, especially looking at you've now brought in Tyrod Taylor to be that bridge quarterback. Jarvis Landry, underneath and over the middle, is a very appealing option that plays to what Tyrod Taylor does. Not to mention when you talk about drafting a quarterback like the Browns most likely will do with the number 1 overall pick, you're going to want somebody reliable and consistent that young quarterback can lean on, and Jarvis Landry is that type of guy. So to me, the deal made all types of sense, even knowing you're bringing him in with this huge cap figure for the franchise tag, knowing that they're probably going to extend him, it still made sense to me. But now the Browns have dealt out that big contract to Jarvis Landry. 5 years, $75 million, $47 million guaranteed. Woo! Jarvis Landry got paid, baby. I mean, he got paid. He got paid. $47 million of guaranteed money over the next 3 years to a guy that didn't even break 1,000 yards in 2017. So, as you can imagine and anticipate, Twitter was abuzz about this a couple of days ago, and a lot of people were talking about it, questioning it, pointing out the values of other receivers' contracts and bigger names and better players and talking about you're going to pay this much to a slot guy. He didn't even break 1,000 yards. And everybody needs to calm down and pump the brakes a little bit on this. Everybody looks at that 5-year, $75 million figure. Like, that always seems to be the big focus. Knowing damn good and well in the NFL, it's basically a 3-year, $47 million deal because that's the guaranteed money, so that's the only thing that matters, and everything afterward is a team option. That's exactly what it is. The Cleveland Browns were in a situation where they have a shit ton of salary cap space, and at some point in time, you have to spend that money on somebody. You have to spend it like you're required to spend a certain percentage of that, a large percentage of that salary cap space. So you can't just sit there and put it in the freaking safe and dive into it every day in the vault like you're freaking Scrooge McDuck. At some point in time, you got to spend that money on somebody. And because you're the Cleveland Browns, and you're coming off of a historically bad run that was capped off by rightfully taking their place in history as the true skid marks of the NFL, that 0-16 season in 2017, with Joe Thomas retiring and breaking everybody's hearts, the point being is you're going to have to overpay a little bit right now in order to get people to come to Cleveland. Not only is it the Cleveland, but it's the skid marks part of it. You're going to have to overpay to keep guys. That's just the reality. But people talking about this and that figure and that figure. In a couple of years, Jarvis Landry's contract's going to be the baseline for number 2 wide receivers or other slot receivers. The Browns just kind of set the market a little bit. And when you look at the Browns, again, as I referenced, what happens if Corey Coleman's hurt again? What happens if Josh Gordon gets suspended again, is potentially out of the league for good? Then what the hell do you have? At least you know what Jarvis Landry, yeah, that's a lot of money for a guy that's not an incredibly explosive player. But he has been consistent, productive, and somewhat reliable over the course of his 4 years in the NFL. So you might sit there and say you overpaid, but at the end of the day, how much did you really overpay? You got to feel like over the next 3 years, you will get return from Jarvis Landry for that money. And again, the Browns had to spend it. And it's not like looking at their current roster that there's a bunch they could go out and blow on in terms of free agency that's going to make a team a whole lot better, especially where we're sitting at now in April. And combined with the fact of they've already got guys like Kevin Zeitler, Jamie Collins, J.C. Treader, Christian Kirksey, Hubbard, Joel Bitonio. All of them are already signed to long-term deals. So you're not having to worry about them for the next couple of seasons, and you still had a shit ton of salary cap space. And then you look at recent draft picks like Myles Garrett, David Njoku, Jabril Peppers, Emmanuel Ogbah, Corey Coleman, Larry Ogunjobi. These are guys that are still 2, 3, potentially 4 years away from you having to worry about extending long term. So if anything, Jarvis Landry's contract became of a bit of a financial necessity in order to eat up a certain percentage of the team's overall salary cap space. And all the while, the Browns are getting a productive player that can play into what Tyrod Taylor does in 2018 and potentially help out that young quarterback going forward. Sometimes the number isn't the number. It's like when people talk about Kirk Cousins and the fact that all of his money was guaranteed. Well, if they would have done a 3-year, $110 million contract with him or a 5-year, $130 million contract with him, it pretty much would have been 3 years, 84 or so million guaranteed. It's the same freaking thing. It just doesn't have the 2 team options tacked on to the end of it. And that's basically what they are. When there's no more team money or guaranteed money, and there's a big cap figure, those are team options. The team can either decide to pick up, renegotiate, or release the player. That's what it is. That's the current environment. That's what they have here, a 3-year, $47 million guaranteed contract with Landry with 2 team options at the end. That's not unreasonable. It's not. There are other things to question about the Browns. There are other things to knock the Browns about. Trading for Jarvis Landry and only giving up a 4th and 7th round pick for him is not one of them. Paying him this contract to me as well is not one of them. You feel pretty good that you will get close to 100 catches and 1,000 yards out of Jarvis Landry the next 3 years. Yes, in theory, that's overpaying a little bit, but there have been much more egregious free agency and off-season contracts being given out in recent years than what Jarvis Landry got from the Browns. And especially when you look at this team again, the situation that they're in, there wasn't much else to spend the money on in free agency. A lot of their guys are already locked up or several years away from being locked up. This was a necessary thing. You had to commit and invest, giving up those multiple picks to give them. Why do that just to potentially let them walk after this year, or where you might even have to put the franchise tag on them again and pay them even more money? It was better for the skid marks to do it now. It was better for them to do it now. It could potentially cost them less long term, and even the price that they pay doesn't seem that great in the grand scheme of things. If you just solely are focused on the number and only focused on the number, then yeah, it's going to look like they overpaid for him, and it looks like the Browns doing Browns again. But when you look at all the elements and you look at the entire picture, I promise you, it's not as bad as a lot of other people are making it out to be.